Okay, welcome back to Drive Home Reviews is All Elite. I know I did not review last week. I was out of town. And we are back to review the special Tuesday night edition of Dynamite for October 18th, 2022. And, well, we got a lot to talk about here, so we want to get right into this. I hate saying this because it's kind of it's been a theme with AEW lately of really great things that are overshadowed by the misfortune and the bad things that happen right at the end. So this was a pretty decent show, I thought, but I might even go so far as to say it's a great show. There were some outstanding elements on it, but everything kind of comes down to that last 10 minutes and what happened there. So let's discuss. So, middle of the main event, Jon Moxley versus Hangman Adam Page, which was it was everything you thought it would be. It was a very hard-hitting, very good match. These guys worked really well together, and this was the kind of match that pay-per-view quality, really. And they're fighting. Of course, Moxley's bleeding, because Moxley loves to bleed. And they're, I think, maybe about 10-15 minutes from the end, and Moxley hits Page with a King Kong lariat, and Page does what the OSW boys would call the Rikishi bump, where he does a 360 and lands on his stomach. Well, something went wrong with the landing here. And I don't believe it was either guy's fault. I think it was just one of those things where the rotation was not full enough. And from what I could tell looking at it, and I didn't go back and watch it very often. I saw the replays, and that was all I really needed to see. I didn't want to watch more of that. It looked like Page came down and landed right on his head. Because he hit the ground and he did not move. Like, at all. And the ref is checking on him, and the announcers are going, and suddenly see the ref kind of do this bit, and they cut. I forget where they cut. I think they may have cut to Moxley, and then when they cut back, the ringside doctor, Doc Sampson, is down there next to Page, and there's some confusion for a second, and then the ref calls off the match. Says he's stopping the fight. He awards it to Moxley, and everybody in the audience is a little like, I'm sorry, what? And it becomes very clear very quickly this is not part of the show. I know that everybody loves now. I love how AEW does it, I think, maybe once or twice, mainly with the MJF thing. But now everything that goes wrong, everybody always says, oh, it's a work. And I'm going to tell you, folks, this was not. You could tell this was not. Everything about the way the situation was being handled, everything about the way the announcers were covering it, everything about the way the fans were reacting, it tells you that this was 100% real. And it was a scary couple of minutes. I don't mind telling you. And you could tell the announcers were shaken. I have to give a lot of credit to Excalibur, who because this happened like 10-15 minutes before the end of the show, so they had to really stall for time to get everything kind of lined up. And so they decided to run through the card for Rampage and Dynamite, and he's doing it in that same, and we got this go, we got da. So he was on, He kept it going. He kept the panic out of his voice and really maintained the illusion there. So I give him a lot of credit for that. You could tell Taz especially was really shaken up by this because, he's been in that situation and he's had friends in that situation. And, you could tell that he was not comfortable or that he was very, very concerned. So that is basically kind of the story of this episode of Dynamite. Now, luckily, I'm happy to say that I got up this morning, and one of the first things I did was I checked all of my local news sources on wrestling to kind of see if there was any report, because there wasn't any last night, and the reports came in that yes, it's a concussion, which is not good news, but it is better news than it possibly could have been. You know, because again, we didn't know anything watching it of what this could have been. So happily, that sounds stupid to say happily. It is a concussion. No word that I've seen on how severe it is, but they said that Hangman was taken to a local Cincinnati medical facility. He was checked out. He was in good spirits, and that he's okay. So that is the best news that could have come out of this. The best option that could have come out of this. And I have to give, and I know that in the intervening days here, that I'm sure every armchair quarterback is going to come out and give a big bitch and moan about how they should have done this, they should have done that. But from my inexperienced eye, I think they did everything they possibly could and did everything to take care of Paige. And I heard a couple of other wrestling commentators talking about this, is that they didn't feel like they had to finish the match or end with a roll-up or, somehow get this to a finish. They just said, no, the guy's down, we're done. And I think, given how AEW was criticized, rightfully so, a few years ago for how they handled the Matt Hardy injury during their pay-per-view, I think they must have tightened up their concussion protocol, and I think they handled everything. They handled it exactly the right way, and even no less an authority than Dr. Christopher Nowinski, who, if you don't know, he was a wrestler, and his career was ended by a concussion, and ever since, in the intervening 20 years, has it been that long? He has become kind of the leading expert and the most vocal proponent of concussion protocols in sports. He's recently been really blasting the NFL, and again, rightfully so, for their mishandling of the Tua situation. And he tweeted out that he felt they did the right thing. They took care of him. The referee did the right thing, and he praised them for everything they did to help aid in a recovery. So that's kind of the story of the night. Well, there's two stories of the night, but let's kind of get to them. So that's the big one, and so as of this recording, the word is Paige is okay. No word on how long he's going to be out. But very scary situation, and everybody did the very, very best that they could. So I sending my best to Hangman Adam Page, and my hopes for a speedy recovery for him. And just a reminder that wrestling is a dangerous occupation. It's a dangerous art form, and it's a lot of times it's not the big moves that do you in. It's these little ones that you've taken a million times. So next time someone says wrestling is fake, I'd say point them at this. But anyway, so that's the big story coming out. Let's talk about the rest of the show and try our best to divorce ourselves from this instance till the end and talk about the rest. All right, so let's see. 6 trios tag team title, Death Triangle versus Best Friends. Good match. I mean, these two groups have fought each other a lot, so they know each other. It's a standard rivalry. They delivered. I mean, there's not much more I can say about it. It was your standard Best Friends versus Death Triangle match. These guys work well together, and it came out good. I guess the story of this one is Pac was planning to use the ring hammer again on Orange Cassidy, and Rey Fenix stopped him. And there was a little bit of jawing at each other about that towards the end of the match. But at the end, they all embraced and everything was fine. So I don't know if they're doing an angle there where Pac is going to break from Death Triangle and have a feud with Phoenix or something like that. I don't know. Or if that was just a little bit of extra character added in just to give the match a little bit more drama. I don't know, but it was a good match. Next up, the Interim Women's World Championship. Toni Storm versus Hikaru Soto and Hikaru Shida. I'm sorry, I called her the wrong name. My apologies. This was a really great match, and in a prominent spot. I'm glad to see that. One of the things we've been talking about a lot is, how do you help improve the women's division? And I think you got to move them out of that dead spot right before the end. The second match, the second to last match of the night. It's kind of a dead spot, and so they moved the ladies here to the second match, and I think it helped. The crowd was a lot more alive and a lot more into the match, and you have two really great wrestlers who put on a great show, did a great match, and very enjoyable. And a lot went down in this, so Toni Storm wins, and right away, Jamie Hayter and Rebel and Britt Baker come in and start beating them down. Saraya's music hits. She comes out and starts getting into it with Britt Baker. From what I hear, Saraya has been cleared to wrestle, so we should be seeing her in the ring again fairly soon, I would imagine. So she's fighting with Britt Baker. The other two are beating up Storm and Shida. And then out comes Little Rio. Little Rio, the very first AEW Women's Champion. So great to see her back, and she got a huge pop because people loved her, and it was just great to see her back. So she's back, hopefully going to be more prominent now, and so I think that was a smart move on their part, and I think that's where they need to keep the women's division, keep them that second match, where the audience is not as tired and not as drained and are more receptive to the work that these women are doing. So a lot of neat things happening in the women's division right now, so I'm interested to see where it goes. Let's see, what were some of the other... It's sad that I'm having a hard time remembering some of the other matches. That should... so again, I'm getting these out of order, but then you had, in terms of matches, you had Chris Jericho versus Dalton Castle for the ROH title. Pretty good. The word is that ROH is getting closer to a weekly television deal. They're going to have one more pay-per-view before the end of the year. They were advertising it last night, Final Battle. And then they're hoping to have their own show somewhere in some format by the start of 2023, which I think would be a great thing. And kind of separate the rosters out. The AEW won't feel as bloated with championships. It's still going to have too many titles, but there was a guy in the crowd with a sign during the women's match saying, "We want women's tag titles." No, we don't. Okay, we don't need more belts right now. Okay, we just don't. Please. But anyway, so if that is true, then that'll be great for them. But anyway, the match was fine. Chris Jericho is just good, and Dalton Castle, now him I do have some familiarity with. I watched ROH when he was very prominently featured, and he's pretty good. I will agree with Taz on the commentaries that Dalton Castle spent a lot of this ROH World Championship match like doing bits, and it's like, I get that this is your big time on national TV, and you kind of want to give the audience a taste of what you are, especially if you're trying to hype up a new ROH. You want to get the crowd interested in the talent that they might not have known before. But I don't know, he spent a lot of time doofing around, and it's like it cost him, because you knew Jericho was not going to do that. As goofy as Jericho can be, he doesn't tend to get into that in the ring. So that was a decent match. But now here's the real story of the night, or what was supposed to be the real story of the night. So midway through, William Regal's out there. He's going to be interviewed by Tony Schiavone, and out comes MJF. And let me tell you, folks, and I think I've mentioned it on here before, I'm not a fan of promos. I understand they're a necessity, and I respect the people who are really good at them. But I like wrestling. I am not a big fan of the, coming out and just saying stuff, because I came of age in the 80s of Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior and the Macho Man just screaming random shit and talking for 10 minutes and saying nothing. So I'm kind of averse to promos. I'm not a big fan. But I have been a fan of MJF's promos from the beginning. He is one that I will go and rewatch his promos because they're so good. And folks, let me tell you, this exchange between MJF and Regal was one for the books. This was outstanding. This was a powerful segment. MJF coming out. What I like about MJF as a villain is that he always has these Ebenezer Scrooge-esque stories to go along with why he hates people. He had this when he was feuding with Punk, and he comes out here and tells this long story about how Regal took a shine to him when he was trying out for the WWE, promised he was going to help him, and then kind of cooled on him, sent him this email that basically brushed him off, and that's what's given MJF, that's lit the fire under him. And he tells this whole story, and Regal's just smirking at him. And Regal says, son, I came of age at a time when I was 16 years old, and I was getting the shit kicked out of me by grown men, and I had to get up and go back. So if all you got was an email, and that hurt your feelings, and you've had it easy, sunshine. And what I like is that this was a very character-driven piece. And what it all comes down to was Regal telling MJF, until you stop taking shortcuts, until you stop, just resting on your laurels, you're always going to feel like you have something to prove. So this was a great setup. And I've heard some people say that what happened later in the night was out of character for MJF. I don't think it is. I think they laid the groundwork here with this awesome promo, and so it fits with his character, very much so, what happens. So what happened, end of the night, they're stalling for time because of what happened with Paige. And so they send it down to Moxley, who, like a true pro, cuts a great promo. And then MJF's music hits. MJF is dragging a referee to the ring. He's got that poker chip. They've been implying for some time that he can cash that in whenever. Which I've gone on record as saying I'm not a fan of. So MJF gets in the ring, he's taking off his shirt, and we're like, we're going to have another match right here. And then he jumps out of the ring, which was a little hard for him because the bottom rope had been loosened to get Paige out. And he grabs the mic and says, no, I don't want that. I don't want any excuses from you. I don't want to fight you when when you've already been spent. I want you at 150% so that when I beat you, there are no excuses, and I'm going to do it for the first time in my life. I'm going to do it clean. And I'm going to challenge you for Full Gear. So the main event for the next pay-per-view is set. Here's the thing. Here's why I love AEW. Despite everything that's been going on and legitimate complaints, here's why I love AEW. Two reasons. Number one, we've known from the beginning that it was going to be MJF versus Moxley at Full Gear for that title, because that's what they've been hyping since the day after All Out. So we have known. But even though we have known this story, the audience has not been fooled by it. Even though we have been fully aware of what's going to happen, the way they have gotten there, it has been just great storytelling. proof that you don't need a swerve all the time. You don't need to subvert expectations all the time. It's okay if we already know what's going to happen. It's the way you get there and the way you tell the story that matter. And they're master storytellers. They tell great long-term stories. So I applaud them for the way this whole thing has been laid out. I also applaud them. This is why sometimes it's hard to criticize AEW. It's kind of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe sometimes. It's hard to criticize things because you don't know what is going to pay off, several movies down the line. As I've said, I've gone on record of saying I am not a fan of the cash-in. I don't like it with Money in the Bank, and I did not like the fact that it's what they were setting up here. Because as I've said, I think it weakens the person who does it. It gives you a great initial pop and a great initial surprise, but I think it sours the entire run because the person didn't fight to earn it. Even if they cheat to win in the end, I think just covering a guy who's already fought a match, it doesn't paint you as a strong champion. So I have not been a fan of this, and I didn't like that that's what they were leading up to. But they were doing that so that they could, I don't think it's a swerve necessarily, to set up this character arc with MJF to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Everyone thinks that's what I do, but I'm not going to do that. And I love that. I think it worked out great. When you look at all of it taken together to the end point, I think it works out fantastic. Now, is he not going to cheat? I doubt that. I think he'll cheat somehow. Because that's just his character. Is it going to be a Daniel Garcia thing? Maybe. I don't know. But I think it was great storytelling. And I have to give them all props here. Everybody involved. The announcers, Regal, Moxley, MJF. This could not have been a comfortable situation for any of them. Because just taking away everything else, I'm sure they were all worried about their coworker, if not their friend. And that's a scary situation. And I'm sure everybody was panicking backstage for those exact same reasons. Number one, worrying about Paige, and number two, going, shit, we've got 10 minutes left in the show. What do we do? So I think everybody handled this as well as can be expected. Again, I'm sure the armchair quarterbacks are going to come out and say, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that, and you could have covered it better. But I've never been in this exact situation, but I work in live entertainment, folks, and I can tell you when something happens on the day with an audience in place and you got to scramble, it is a scary, scary situation. And I've never had to do it with someone who is legitimately injured to this extent. So I think everybody involved did the best job they could. And I think they should all be recognized for that. So I haven't talked about mini matches, and I'm sorry the rest of them have kind of been shunted out of my head just due to everything else that went down. But I think this was a good a good television show. And I think hats have to go off to everybody involved for handling a very scary situation to the best of their personal ability. So that's my take on it. All right, so there you have it. So thank you all for joining me. Bundle up, stay warm, and as always, drive safe, and I'll see you at the movies. Got to come up with a better sign-off for this.